Welcome, chosen ones. Let's get one thing clear. Your power was never in your reaction. It was always in your restraint. They thought you'd chase them. They thought you'd fold, cry, explode, or come crawling back. But what they didn't count on was your growth, your evolution, your sacred decision to choose peace over performance. You are not here to entertain toxicity. You are not here to audition for love. You are not here to prove your worth to anyone who failed to see it the first time. And let me tell you something real. The fact that you didn't chase, that's your revolution. That's your fire. That's your healing in motion. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not bitter. You're boundaried. You're not lost. You're finally home, within yourself. So stand tall. You didn't lose them. You found you. And that, my friend, is a win no one can take. There comes a moment when the noise of the world no longer commands a reaction. Instead of scattering attention like sand in the wind, a quiet discernment settles in. What once felt like obligation now feels like intrusion. It's not coldness, it's clarity. That finite reservoir of mental and emotional bandwidth becomes something no longer available on demand. Time, focus, and presence take on new shape, not as default offerings, but as deliberate choices. Engaging out of guilt, chasing empty echoes, or plugging leaks in someone else's sinking vessel becomes foreign. You no longer donate your presence to chaos masquerading as connection. Conversations are not arenas, they are mirrors. Interactions are not toll-free highways, they require purpose. This shift is not aggressive, but assertive, like closing a door softly and locking it from the inside. It rattles those who relied on your availability as a given, not a gift. When you stop playing the part they wrote for you, they stumble, unsure how to respond to the unwritten script. But that is no longer your concern. The art of withholding isn't cruelty, it's conservation. To guard your emotional space is to declare, without apology, that you've finally stopped trading your essence for crumbs of validation. What changes isn't the world, it's how you filter it. The power isn't in turning away out of spite, but in walking forward without explanation. This isn't withdrawal, it's evolution. There's a resilience that grows in silence, where reactions once lived. It isn't loud or dramatic. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply stops responding to storms that aren't its own. Letting go isn't an escape. It's a decision rooted in clarity. Walking away isn't surrender. It's strategy. The ability to withdraw from noise without guilt, to not answer invitations to emotional tug-of-wars, signals a self-respect that doesn't need validation. Strength often looks like neutrality, like choosing quiet over proving a point, like declining the weight of burdens that never belonged to you. Distance becomes a shield, not because nothing matters, but because certain things no longer deserve access. What once pierced now passes. What once triggered now teaches. This isn't apathy, it's alignment. It's the recognition that staying grounded requires you to stop dancing to the rhythm of someone else's imbalance. Boundaries form not from bitterness, but from the desire to breathe clean air. People may call it coldness, yet it's simply the refusal to be consumed. Detachment reveals who controls their temperature and who waits for the world to adjust the thermostat. Feel God's love stirring within you? Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You were made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. The shift is almost invisible. Less arguing, fewer explanations, no chasing. It's the weightless feeling of choosing response over reaction. In that stillness, others are faced with their own restlessness. Attempts to provoke fall flat. Tactics lose their edge. When presence is earned, not expected, the rules change. The mind, unclouded by turmoil, sees patterns clearly. The heart, no longer pulled in every direction, begins to pulse in rhythm with purpose. You engage not because you're compelled, but because you choose. And that choice, rooted in self-command, becomes your quiet revolution. The retreat is not weakness. It is wisdom wearing stillness like armor. Subtle dismissals, veiled condescension, and invisible slights are no longer filtered through tolerance. What once passed as not a big deal now registers as corrosion. The erosion doesn't begin with shouting matches. It starts with silence that feels like pressure, apologies that arrive laced with accusation, and support that always seems to come with a hidden invoice. Calling it out isn't dramatic, it's clarity. There's no longer a willingness to stretch your sanity just to maintain someone else's comfort. That slow drip of disapproval once seeped in unchallenged, but now it's identified, confronted, and blocked. It's no longer about waiting for them to treat you better. It's about refusing to offer the invitation. This shift doesn't stem from anger. It stems from finality. Any attempt to distort the meaning of care, of fairness, of presence, falls flat. The bar is no longer set by history, guilt, or loyalty. It's set by emotional health. And those who once used confusion to gain advantage now feel the sting of disengagement. The tools they once wielded, tension, dismissal, emotional fog, no longer open the same doors. When reactions become measured and distance replaces panic, the pattern breaks. And in that break, your space is reclaimed. That refusal to be a character in someone else's emotional maze isn't just healing. It's a quiet revolution. Confidence returns. Self-doubt evaporates. Internal alarms that were ignored now ring clear and undeniable. Integrity replaces justification. What follows is a reorientation. Where once you tiptoed through someone else's volatility, now you move freely in your own clarity. And that shift, steady and precise, becomes a permanent filter for every future connection. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. There's no longer space for bartering your values or silencing your instincts to soothe someone else's discomfort. The days of explaining your limits or watering down your truth to be palatable are gone. Integrity now overrides appeasement. That transformation didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived quietly, like a boundary that didn't bend this time. What used to demand explanation now meets stillness. What once triggered self-doubt now gets a pause and a no. Others may still test, still poke, still prod, but they're no longer met with negotiation. The terms have changed. Decision-making is now governed by inner steadiness rather than external pressure. The refusal to shrink, to overextend, to perform in someone else's theater of expectation becomes an undeniable presence. It's not aggression. It's the architecture of self-respect finally built without compromise. People accustomed to your flexibility are now met with firmness that doesn't apologize. The script of over-explaining or adjusting to avoid discomfort has been deleted. In its place is clarity that doesn't waver, even under scrutiny. And while some recoil at this recalibration, others rise to meet it. No longer driven by validation, your actions serve only alignment. Each no is intentional. Each yes, sovereign. This shift becomes a quiet stabilizer in every room you enter. It doesn't beg to be seen, but it is felt. And those used to drawing lines for you now meet the line you drew for yourself. Your silence speaks volumes. Your standards now act as gatekeepers. The narrative has changed, not because you sought power, but because you stopped surrendering it. Freedom is born when the hunger for permission dissolves. Existence no longer bends under the weight of expectation. For too long, movements were measured by imagined applause. Words softened for palatability. Choices filtered through invisible judges. But when that invisible leash snaps, a new clarity sets in. You no longer shape yourself to fit into frames others drew. You move without the echo of someone else's approval shadowing your steps. The liberation isn't loud, but it is final. It changes how breath feels, how decisions land, how days unfold. There's no more bargaining with your own instincts. No more diluting your truth to make it easier for others to swallow. Choices are made not to be liked, but to be honest. And that honesty becomes a compass that never lies. The noise fades. The weight lifts. The filters vanish. People who once relied on your compliance notice the difference. They reach. But you're no longer tethered. Their reactions, once powerful, now fall flat. They try to remind you of the old script, but you've outgrown the role. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of chasing, you remain still. That stillness unnerves them because they can no longer access you through the old doors. This detachment isn't pride, it's precision. It allows you to move fully in your own direction without dragging ghosts behind you. It is not the absence of connection, it's the end of dependence. That shift rewires not just how you exist, but how you value your existence. And from that place, you build. Not from need, not from fear, but from the deep assurance that nothing outside you holds authority over your worth. Power is often revealed not in retaliation, but in stillness. Dominance doesn't require noise. Sometimes it's the quiet exit that delivers the deepest impact. When reaction is withheld, when emotion is replaced with precision, the entire landscape shifts. The one expecting chaos is met with calm. The one hoping for engagement is answered with space. They push, but the push goes nowhere. Their rhythm is broken because your steps no longer follow their tempo. They rely on provocation like oxygen, but you've stopped breathing that air. Without effort, without a single swing, the mask slips. Their games fall apart not because you fought, but because you didn't. Their need to trigger, to control, to be seen through disruption becomes meaningless when you no longer validate it. The tension becomes theirs to hold. The discomfort remains unshared. And in that absence, their facade thins. What was once masked by noise becomes visible in silence. They find themselves exposed, not by force, but by the vacuum left when you decline to play along. The irony is sharp. The one who stays neutral holds the greatest influence. You remain anchored. They unravel. The decision to withhold your presence from battles unworthy of your peace becomes the sharpest form of clarity. It guards your energy like a vault and offers no explanation for its locks. There's no retaliation, no spectacle, just a recalibration of roles. What once held power over you now looks powerless, without your reaction to sustain it. And that refusal to engage doesn't weaken your stance, it fortifies it. You didn't retreat. You rose, silently and higher. Some situations collapse faster when left untouched. Not every disruption deserves a response. There are storms that feed only on attention, tensions that dissolve in silence, and behaviors that falter when denied an audience. What once demanded reaction now meets quiet distance, not from avoidance, but from discernment. Some tensions are self-made loops, running on repetition, designed to pull you in just to spin you around. But when you no longer engage, the wheel slows, the drama fades, and what remains is only what they brought with them, not what you contributed. It takes a certain strength to allow dysfunction to undo itself without stepping in to rescue or resolve. You recognize now that inserting your energy into chaos only gives it shape, and that withholding yourself lets it lose momentum. Distance, when rooted in clarity, becomes a strategy. You no longer waste effort trying to decode half-truths or amend situations built on imbalance. What unravels, unravels, and you stand still while it does. Those who once depended on your reactions now scramble in the absence of them. Their performances fall flat. Their rhythm breaks. Your silence becomes the end of their script. There is no explosion, no closure, just you, choosing to no longer participate in loops that go nowhere. The pattern becomes obvious. The manipulation is transparent, and your refusal to feed it becomes a quiet liberation. You preserve your energy. You guard your mental space. And you respond only where your peace remains intact. Watching the collapse from afar is not apathy, it is mastery. You no longer confuse action with impact. Letting something burn out on its own becomes a lesson in restraint. It is not what you say or do, but what you deny that reveals your strength. When chaos meets composure, truth surfaces without a word. There's a discomfort people face when their games don't land. When the silence they're met with speaks louder than any argument. That steadiness, the unshaken stillness, becomes something they can't dismiss. It's not passive, it's surgical. The absence of reaction reveals their dependence on disruption. They expect pushback. They expect validation through resistance. But instead, they find themselves confronting an unmovable presence that makes their tactics irrelevant. What once gave them leverage now offers none. Their efforts to provoke lose grip, not because you push back, but because you no longer move at all. It's in that stillness they see themselves clearly, without distortion, without defense. There's no noise to blame, no friction to frame the narrative around, just a mirror they can't look away from. Their defensiveness increases, but it lands in empty space. You've withdrawn the stage. The act ends because the audience walked away. While they flail, you conserve. While they overextend, you remain. The ground they once stood on depended on your reaction. But you've removed that foundation, and they're left balancing on air. This quiet shift holds more weight than any confrontation. You don't need to attack, to accuse, or to retreat in rage. You simply don't step forward. And that choice changes everything. Their discomfort is not your concern. Their unraveling is not your responsibility. What you've claimed is control, not over them, but over yourself. Your calm doesn't silence them. It exposes them. Without raising your voice, without making a case, you've made your stance undeniable. And the contrast between their chaos and your poise becomes the sharpest truth of all. Vision thrives when you stop feeding distractions. There comes a point when noise loses its appeal. Where once reaction felt necessary, now silence feels strategic. Each decision begins to reflect a larger picture, a life shaped by foresight, not impulse. The momentary flare-ups that once felt urgent now seem like interruptions to something more meaningful. You stop lending your presence to tension that goes nowhere. The more you disengage from fruitless interactions, the more space you create for progress. Choices no longer orbit around pleasing others or proving anything. They orbit around direction, growth, and impact. This shift isn't about avoidance, it's about refinement. Drama, no matter how loud, becomes irrelevant when you're focused on what endures. Disputes built on ego and games built on attention-seeking stop gaining entry. Your time becomes reserved for the kind of living that multiplies itself through purpose, creation, and contribution. And those who once relied on conflict to stay close find themselves outside your perimeter. The silence they meet isn't emptiness, it's intention. This new rhythm doesn't draw crowds, but it builds something that lasts. Every day becomes a deliberate investment in substance over noise, in momentum over reaction. While others get pulled into circular chaos, you rise in straight lines. Your peace, once seen as passivity, now reads as power. The consistency with which you choose direction over drama sets a new precedent, one that doesn't seek applause, but leaves a lasting imprint. What you build in quiet defiance of chaos becomes the legacy that outlives the noise. Once spent, emotional energy doesn't return, only consequences do. There's no refund on the hours wasted explaining, fixing, or chasing. Every ounce of emotional investment lands somewhere, but not always where it benefits you. Some people consume your presence as if it's endless, until you decide it's not. That's when everything changes. Realizing your inner reserves are limited, you begin treating them as sacred. Engagement becomes intentional. No more offering clarity to confusion or attention to turbulence. You watch instead of react. You observe instead of repair. What drains you is no longer indulged. What restores you is now prioritized. The urgency to be understood fades as the cost becomes clear. You stop spending your emotional wealth on echoes. The silence you choose builds. Your refusal to pour into hollow spaces is not rejection, it's protection. You start to feel lighter, sharper, whole. Those who once thrived on your attention notice your absence, but they don't understand its cost. Their need for validation now echoes without reply. They may push, hoping to reignite the cycle, but the engine has shut down. You no longer participate in performances that leave you empty. Each time you hold back from reacting, your strength accumulates. Each moment you walk away, you reinvest in yourself. This shift isn't about isolation, it's about conservation. You begin pouring into areas that nourish you, where the return is depth, fulfillment, and clarity. The boundaries grow thicker, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You no longer trade your stability for temporary connection. You no longer drain yourself for the illusion of harmony. Emotional currency is finite, and now it belongs fully to you. Predictability no longer defines how you respond to provocation. Repetition was their method, setting the scene, waiting for your familiar cue. The same emotional traps, the same lines thrown, all crafted to summon a reaction they could manage. But now the dynamic is unfamiliar. You've disrupted the sequence. What once pulled you in no longer commands your attention. Not reacting isn't indifference, it's interruption. You've stepped out of the loop and, in doing so, collapsed its rhythm. They don't know how to continue without the response they've come to expect. Their influence weakens. Their urgency intensifies. But you remain unmoved. This refusal to engage isn't passive, it's intentional. It protects your mental clarity, your emotional boundaries, and your right to choose which experiences deserve your presence. Without your reactions feeding the cycle, their power fades into noise. Their provocations, once effective, now echo into silence. This shift extends beyond the individual. It alters the emotional climate around you. Others take notice. They see that escalation requires participation, and you've withdrawn the invitation. The dominoes stop falling because the chain has been broken. You now navigate from discipline, not default. The instincts they once relied on, anger, guilt, defense, are now replaced with discernment. And that shift is not just visible, it's magnetic. People sense the difference. You respond less. You observe more. What was once a battlefield is now a quiet space where you call the terms. The tension they depend on no longer finds you. And in that absence, their patterns expose themselves for what they are. Cycles sustained only by those willing to repeat them.